The Baylor Bears have 6 commitments coming into their big recruiting weekend. What's next for them, and how is Baylor going to do this year in the Big 12 with Sawyer Robertson behind center?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a crossover edition of the Portal Podcast and Locked On Baylor. We are going to be having a lot of fun talking about their recruiting and what's going on because they've got a big weekend. They've got more than 10 visitors coming to Waco. Who should we expect? What can happen this weekend? And the next, we got to talk a little bit about the portal and Sawyer Robertson. How much help did they get for him? We're going to talk about who he's throwing it to, the big-time running back for Baylor. And, of course, what is Baylor's chance to win the Big 12? They got the pieces on offense, that's for sure. To help me do all of that today on the Portal and the Locked On Baylor podcast, my guy Camp Stewart. How you doing, Camp?
Brian, doing well. Excited this time of year, man. Everyone's feeling good about their recruiting class in June, so I'm excited too.
Well, that's the way it should be, man.
I hope so, yeah.
Dave Aranda has got a good start, but they haven't had a commitment since April. This is the weekend it's got to happen. This is why I brought you in before the weekend got started. I wanted to see what your thoughts were. They've recruited well in state. They've gotten some pretty good players. I watched some film with some of the kids they got a couple of months ago, and I'm like, okay, these guys, they played the SEC, played Big Ten, whatever. Yeah. They're good.
Yeah.
What is the expectation this year in recruiting, though? Because Baylor's got a ton of money. Mm-hmm. NIL's legit. It's a private school with cash coming out of its nose. Should they be the school that takes that next step in recruiting? Because I hear, Texas Tech, this and that. Like that billionaire guy for Tech. I get it. But Baylor's, it doesn't have to be one person, and they've got a lot of people involved. Should this be the year they take a step forward? Sawyer, that's an NFL draft pick at quarterback.
Right.
You've got an NFL running back. You've got an NFL wide receiver. I would think it would be pretty easy to sell Baylor. Am I off in any way, shape, or form here?
No, I think it is a year that you should see a step up. What's weird is they had some momentum in the class of 25 last summer, coming off a 3-9 season, and they had brought in Keenan Hall from SMU to be kind of their main recruiter, and things really started to take off, especially in that just jewel of a place, the DFW area, when it comes to big-time high school football prospects. They've done really well there, and so coming into this year, you're like, okay, now let's set the stage of an 8-4 team that looked real impressive in the back half of last season. They're probably going to be a ranked team going into this year. Like you said, you got NFL draft picks on the roster right now. Like this should get better. And with the names they're getting involved in, it is getting better. And I think what Baylor is trying to figure out is how much, and I think there are still some programs figuring this out. Maybe it's too late to be doing this, but how much of the balance of their roster is coming from high school recruiting and continuity, and how much is coming from the portal, because they have gotten a few guys the last 2 years as plug and play starters from the transfer portal. But obviously being in Texas, that's got to be a big part of your game. You've got the best recruits in the country in your backyard. And you mentioned Texas Tech. I'll throw in SMU as well as an ACC team that's kind of in our backyard. Those two have been really hitting 400 in the recruiting game the last couple of years. And I think Baylor's at a good spot right now. We saw this really start, the floodgates really start to open, as is with most programs after these official visit weekends last year. These 3 weeks are going to be pretty big for Baylor in terms of solidifying that class and solidifying that momentum. So yeah, this needs to be a step up. Depending on what outlet you're going on, I'd love to see Baylor in the top 25 for recruiting class this year. I know that's not a big number for a lot of programs, but Baylor's never been a top 20 recruiting, like year in, year out kind of program. And some of their best teams ever, which does go back to the Art Briles days, were barely cracking the top 25 in recruiting classes. They developed talent at the college level. And maybe that does need to change a little bit with the portal these days, but I would love to see him in the top 25.
I think that's a realistic goal. And I'm just going to say it. Baylor's from downtown Dallas, an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. Hour 20.
Yeah. Traffic, you push it to a little hour and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't want to talk about traffic. I've dealt with enough of that. I lived in Florida. But I by the way, Dallas's traffic pattern's a lot better than any place in Florida. The point is still the same. That's an easy drive.
Yeah.
You can hit that area hard.
Yeah.
And with their money, I would think they should be able to do pretty well. And ironically, again, I was just looking at their list and some of the kids they had committed, but I was like, well, which ones of these kids do I feel the best about? Who do they have a chance at? Like, it should be defensive players because Dave is a really good defensive mind. And ironically, kid that I've been around, Shadarius Toodle is visiting this weekend from a bizarre place. He is from Mobile, Alabama. He's an inside linebacker committed to Auburn. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking this is an opportunity for Baylor to take a step up. So you got an opportunity with a guy like that. And there are more guys coming in on defense this weekend that I'm really interested in. Victor Lincoln committed to Oklahoma State from Lancaster. That's basically Dallas. It's on the south side, about an hour from Waco. They got him coming in this weekend. They also have Colin Thompson, an edge player out of Grand Oaks in Spring, Texas, down by Houston. So they're staying hot with the kids they need to, getting them on campus. And even, again, the school we've talked about already on this show, Luke Bell, a corner out of Canyon High School in New Braunfels, down by San Antonio. He is a kid committed to Texas Tech. That's a corner. They're battling the schools we expect them to.
Yep.
I just want your honest opinion. I know you don't follow recruiting like I do, but do you feel like they're going to be able to flip some of these kids? Do you think, especially like the defensive guys, to me, if they don't get those with Dave being the head coach, that's going to make me nervous? Are they going to be able to take that step, or is this going to be a little disappointing in your opinion?
No, I think you highlight a pretty interesting factor there. Is of these three guys, I wouldn't be stunned at all if they flip one of them, maybe even two of them. And that is kind of the nature of college football at this time of year. But also, we saw it last year. I'll give you an example, actually. Caleb Burns, the linebacker who was originally committed to Tech, another Houston area kid, so Texas kid, had originally committed to Tech. They flipped him in his official visit in June. He ended up being courted by some other big-time programs, including Oregon. He went out and flew to the Oregon-Ohio State game back in whatever that was, October, and he stuck with Baylor. And you talked about it, like the defensive side of the ball. That is where Dave Aranda can kind of cook there, right? I mean, he can. It's been slim pickings. Baylor hasn't had a draft pick in a couple years, but you look at the time, his first year at Baylor and his last couple of years at LSU, and he can point to you top 10 defenses and guys going in the NFL, and that's what these kids are really into. The Shadarius Toodle one is very interesting though, Brian, because that's a guy that Auburn really loves. Like Zach's talked about him on his show and Locked on Auburn a bit. Like they love Shadarius Toodle. And this has been kind of a back and forth for months and months now, really since the football season ended, that Baylor was trying to flip him. And a couple other schools too. He just visited Georgia. He visited Michigan last week. So there are some other big time programs in on him as well. But to have Baylor as one of your three official visits when you're being courted by Auburn and Michigan and Georgia, like that is kind of a big deal. And it's rumors that we've heard for a while. I mean, this kid's got some NFL draft prospectus, or at least some NFL draft traits already as a high schooler. And I think that's a guy who would fit really well in a Dave Aranda kind of system. So that's an interesting one to watch this weekend. He visits the school he's actually committed to, Auburn, next weekend. So we'll see.
Yeah, there's some mixed feelings about where he's going to play and how he's going to produce at Auburn from what I've heard. We'll see how that plays out. But a couple of the other kids that I find interesting that got visit, another defensive guy, Jordan Kreitz out of Friendswood, Texas. That's down in the Houston area. Defensive lineman. We know Dave likes length. He's used a three-man line before, et cetera. This kid's 6'6", 255, so he kind of fits the profile. That's important. And they also have Kingston Hall coming in. He's another kid that's pretty big, 6'3", 265. He's a kid out of Oklahoma. He's uncommitted. So they're going kind of defense heavy, and they got a couple offensive tackles coming in. I'm curious to see, you could never have enough of those. Vincent Johnson Jr. is a kid coming from Sulphur Springs. That's East Texas, famous little football town. You got to hit those if you're Baylor, obviously. If they don't get 2 or 3 commitments from this group by like June 20th to June 25th, a lot of kids are taking 3-4 visits for the commit. So immediately I'm not as concerned about. Right. But I just want to tell Baylor fans, this is the weekend they should look at. Go back like 3 weeks from now. How many of these kids did we get? That'll be a very important part, because if you set that bar high on the first weekend that you really bring in a bunch of guys it makes it a lot easier. And then the next weekend, they've got even more kids coming in. They got 11. And then the final weekend right now, from what I'm seeing, another balanced weekend, another 11. So they're trying to keep it somewhat small, and I like what they're doing. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal haul and a certain quarterback that everybody's probably pretty familiar with, Sawyer Robertson. That is next on this crossover edition of Locked on Baylor and Locked on the Portal. The NBA playoffs are down to the finals. Pacers just came up with a stunning 1-point win, and every night is going to be delivering more highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans got all kinds of different ways to play smart and to win big. Halliburton for the Pacers last night had a double-double again. He wasn't the scorer he normally is, but he had a pretty big game. OKC kept him off the scoreboard, but Pacers still came up with 111 points. Will they change it up? Do you go over, under, maybe on a Halliburton prop? Maybe it's something else you want to do, maybe a same-game parlay. It's easy with FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Cam, thank you once again for doing this crossover, Locked on Baylor and Locked on the Portal. Please make us your first listen each and every day. If it were to be one guy that you pick from the portal that's going to come in on the offensive side and is really going to help Sawyer, whether it's pass protection, running back, tight end, whatever, which guy do you think Baylor fans should be most excited about from the transfer portal?
I should be picking an offensive lineman, Brian. I should, but I'm just not as smart a football guy. I'm just not. So I'm gonna stick with the sexy pick, and I'm gonna pick it wide receiver. Kobe Prentice comes in from Alabama, and he had a pretty interesting career there. He got a lot of touches his first season, still playing for Saban back in 2022. So he comes in with a year of eligibility, comes in, fits a need in the slot position for them, especially with this kind of Ashton Hawkins eligibility in the air, but that's another story. He's a guy who produced in the SEC as a young guy, and his touches went down. He didn't play very much last year under Kalen DeBoer, had an injury. And so this is a guy that I think can get unleashed in a Jake Spavital offensive system. They had a solid offensive line last year. I think they reinforced it, even at the tail end here with some portal commitments. But Kobe Prentice is the one I'm looking at from the offensive side to, kind of bolster a position group. It's a position group that's going to do okay. They bring back 3 of their top 4 pass catchers, which includes a tight end in Michael Trigg. But they kind of need like a third option at wide receiver. And Kobe Prentice, I think based off his numbers and the tape, can absolutely fill that position. He's someone who's looking for a bit of highlight tape himself. This is the offense he's going to get it in.
Let's talk about the other receiver that, if there's no way to avoid, because it's a great story.
Yeah.
How many walk-ons end up even starting, let alone being an all Big 12 level performer? I don't give a crap which position it is. This is insane. 10 touchdowns for a former walk-on?
Yeah.
Take it away, Cam. Give me the breakdown and when you were like, okay, this is cool. We need to talk about this guy Locked on Baylor. Give us the breakdown.
Yeah. So Josh Cameron comes in and, coming off that big time year. And I'll tell you, I remember him from 2023 when they were terrible. They were 3-9. And they were just kind of throwing anything at the wall and hoping it stuck. You got rotated a lot of guys in. I remember I'm like, Josh Cameron, man, he's playing physical out there. He's getting after it and run blocking for a 3-9 team, and he's getting open. He's open on third down a lot. Maybe that's someone who could be a piece for them next year. And boy, did he become that? I'll tell you, when he took over for a lot of Baylor fans was the Colorado game last year, which most of us would like to forget. The quote-unquote Hail Mary at the end of regulation. They lose it overtime. But Josh Cameron had a punt return that nearly went for a touchdown. It went about 90 yards and somehow didn't end up at a touchdown, which is tough to do. But he broke 6 tackles along the way. And you're like, my God, this kid is a weapon, like an absolute weapon. And of course, it took that to the outside as well. And when Sawyer Robertson kind of hit his stride, so did Josh Cameron. I mean, it's the tale as old as time. Any quarterback coming in has got their favorite receiver, and that's what Josh Cameron became. And it became this every week. Sawyer Robertson's going to throw 3 touchdowns. Josh Cameron's going to catch at least one of them. He had this great back shoulder catch with a toe tap against BYU for a touchdown. He had 3 touchdowns against Tech in a game that Sawyer Robertson looked like he had stolen the show with 5 touchdown passes. He just became a monster and an all Big 12 kind of guy. And to be honest, I think he even didn't get enough respect towards the end of the season. He comes in here. I saw a list the other day. I can't remember who put it out, what publication put it out, but it was the top 20 non-quarterback returners in college football, and he was up there at number 11. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's getting some of the shine here, some of the respect, but this dude's getting real NFL kind of buzz because of his size and his quickness more so than even his speed.
Well,
and he scores, Brian. 10 touchdowns, man. 10 touchdowns. That plays.
Yeah, 6'1", 218 punt returner. That is a weird deal. Like Randy Moss is the rarest player ever. He was 6'5", who would return punts and they kick it away from him. Yeah. If you take him out of the equation, how many other guys are like over 215? You know what I mean?
Unicorn.
Like that's what I'm saying. And it's like he was a walk. How is he a walk-on?
And this was like a COVID walk-on too. Like he was playing at a big program down in the Austin area. They played in the state championship that year. And this is December, I think early January, because the COVID year, they were playing the state championship and he didn't have anywhere to go. He still didn't have any real big time offers. And so Baylor reaches out to him kind of the 11th hour, like, hey man, we can't give you anything right now, but if you want to walk on, I think we can find a spot for you somewhere down the line. He's like, yep, sign me up. And now here we are.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
Let's flip over to Dave's side of the ball, defense. Is there anybody that you think is going to make a big difference for them or at least kind of help? Because obviously, like the Hail Mary play, et cetera. First thing I'm thinking is, did they get any DBs? Yeah. I mean, that's terrible, bro. I was watching that game live. The things I said when that play happened, I can't repeat on this podcast because it's just pathetic. It was pathetic. And I'm like, okay, where are the DBs? Did they get any more pass rushers, et cetera?
Yeah, so they did get a couple of defensive backs, not ones that were at the top of any transfer portal rankings or anything, but guys with upside. The big one would be Calvin Simpson-Hunt. He's coming in from Ohio State. He didn't play a lot defensively. Yeah, and he was a big-time recruit out of high school, again, in that North Texas area, Waxahachie is where he's coming out of. Didn't play a ton of defense, but someone that Ohio State was liking for next year. Wins the national championship, and then the next day basically is committing to Baylor. That's someone to watch for to kind of take that next step. They got a safety, Devin Turner, out of Northwestern, which is actually right down the road from where I'm living now. All Big Ten honorable mention guy. It looks like he had surgery. We don't have any update on that, but posted a picture of him in like a post-op room. So that's not a great sign for Baylor. But I'll tell you, where I'm really looking is the pass rush. And they went out and they got some guys with some upside. Amarion Winston was another big-time 4-star recruit out of Texas. He went to Oregon. Didn't play a lot after 2 years, so now he's trying to get some time on the field in the Big 12. Matthew Fobbs-White, one of those jack linebackers that Dave Aranda loves, coming from Tulane, had some sack numbers last year. They went out and got another nose tackle. I'm going to try here, Brian. I often don't try. Samu Tamanupepe from Texas A&M.
You did better than I did.
By September, I'll have it down, I swear. He was another guy who has 3 years of eligibility left. Was a big-time recruit. Now comes to Baylor. But the one guy that I have focused on more than anybody in all of these names I've just rattled off on you is actually at the linebacker position, where I think they're doing pretty well already, and that's Travion Barnes. Comes in from FIU. He was the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year last year. I think that guy comes in right away and is playing meaningful snaps, if not a starter, at inside linebacker for the Bears. I think that's a guy who shows some real promise and can kind of slot in right away.
That's an awesome amount of information right there, Cam. I appreciate
it. Maybe too much.
You got it lined up pretty good for all the fans. When we come back, I want to talk a little Heisman with Sawyer Robertson, is he getting enough respect? We'll talk about that. And the Big 12, like out of all the teams, there's like 12 or 13 quarterbacks that have starting experience are going to be on the. It is ridiculous. Where does Baylor fit into all that? That is next here on this crossover, Locked on Baylor and Locked on the Portal. Thank you once again for making the Locked on the Portal and Locked on Baylor your first listens each and every day. We truly appreciate you stopping in. Cam, I appreciate you once again as well doing this crossover today. Let's talk Sawyer Robertson. That's a quarterback that not many people until last year knew much about, and all of a sudden it's like, holy cow. Yeah. They had the 6-game win streak towards the end of the year. They were just flying crazy with the big plays when they needed them, like they were clutch. He didn't always throw for a ton of yards. We'll talk about the running back in a second. They also have NFL running back, so they didn't always have to throw it around. But when did you know that like he was that guy? Like which game was it? You're like, okay, this could be really fun the rest of this season.
Yeah, it's a tough one to almost pick out. I mean, the real one is Texas Tech, which is when they started that winning streak, and he threw 5 touchdowns. But awesome. That's a pretty good one to highlight. But I'll highlight one that was actually a loss that dropped them to 2-3. It was after the Colorado game where, Baylor blew it, right? Like they blew that game against Colorado. And so we have that game against BYU the next Saturday. BYU had just beaten SMU. And so they're kind of on the radar here. They're on the scene. They're ranked. And so we're like, hey, this is a chance for Baylor to really shut everybody up. They blew it last week. You get a ranked team on your home field at 11 a.m., the next week, you can really kind of shut some people up by beating them here. And they fell down 14-0 in a hiccup, and they were playing from behind the whole time. And Sawyer had to throw on every down. And he threw it like over 50 times in that game. And he kind of ran out of gas at the end of it, but they only lost by 6 points. They only lost 34-28, and they had a chance on their last drive. They missed a 4th down. And it was there where you're like, this was not last year's Sawyer Robertson that we saw in a pinch for 2 or 3 games when Blake Shapen was hurt. Like this guy is a different player. This is the guy we thought we were getting from Mississippi State, needed an offense that kind of tailored to him, not the wide zone. And you're like, this guy can keep you in games. And then they lose to Iowa State. No one plays well in that game. Iowa State obviously had a terrific defense. And then after the bye week, he rips apart Tech, which was his hometown. He's from Lubbock. And so they go out to Lubbock, and he just crushes them. He throws 5 touchdowns. He doesn't even break a sweat doing it. He's counting out the number to the fans of how many touchdowns he's thrown. And from there, you're like, we've got a player. We've got an offense. We've got a team. All of a sudden, we 3-4. We've got a team. But that was definitely the breakout performance. But I think a lot of people were looking at the end of that BYU game and thinking, we might have something here. This kid kept him in the game pretty much single-handedly.
Okay, well now the key, like for any quarterback, offensive line play is huge. That's fine. But if you're really going to be good, you've got to have the ability to run the football and use play action is part of your game. Mm-hmm. Bryson Washington was the guy to kind of help. He had 1,028 yards as a redshirt freshman, 12 touchdowns. If Sawyer Robertson's going to make a run at the Heisman, does Bryson have to play at that level, or does he got to go up? Because, like, as I mentioned before the break, 12, 13 guys in the Big 12 are returning, or they're transferring, like the Dampier kid was New Mexico or whatever, going to Utah. It's insane. So this will be the most exciting league if you like offense. Big 12 by a mile. This
Big
next
12's
year.
back when it comes to that offense, man. It's going to feel like 10 years ago.
Even if the defenses take the step up,
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of offensive points because these guys – there'll be a bunch of these guys that at least make it to an NFL training camp in some capacity, the NFL draft comment, whatever. Mm-hmm. So does Bryson have to really help Sawyer a lot, or can he just be what he was last year? He had 1,028 yards at 12 scores. I mean, that's really good. But what do you think about him?
Yeah, I think he can't drop below the level. Let's just say that. If he's getting 700 yards and no one else is really picking up the slack, then that's probably a problem. Because it kind of goes without saying for most college offenses, but this Jake Spavital one is so predicated on the play action pass. And Sawyer was so effective in the play action game last year. And you just saw it when they didn't have a running game, I think is where it stood out. That BYU game I was just talking about, they're from behind the whole game. It was close, but they didn't catch them because they didn't have a running game and they didn't have the They weren't in the score and situation to run the ball. The Texas Bowl against Garrett Nussmeier and LSU. Bryson Washington gets a head injury in the first quarter. They go to Dawson Pendergrass, who's maybe the best second running back in the Big 12, but it's a different ball game. And Baylor, again, they're down. They don't have their running back. They don't have that kind of versatility on offense. They've got to throw it every down. And even as good as Sawyer Robertson is, like, teams can scheme against that. Good teams like BYU, like LSU. So, yeah, he would need to be at that level or above if you want to talk about Baylor being a CFP team, a Big 12 pushing team, and for Sawyer Robertson to maybe get some dark horse Heisman Trophy consideration. He needs a running back to go with it.
I think that's really important. Play action, especially for the NFL level, the way he plays is going to help him in the draft too. I think he will be a guy that has a chance to go to New York. Last question, I'll get you out of here on that. Dave Aranda has been up and down at Baylor. The 3-9 season obviously stings. They rebound somewhat last year. The 6 wins in a row is wild. They don't beat LSU, but they had a good season. What do they have to do this year for Dave to keep his job and for Baylor to move forward? Because I would assume Sawyer is going to go bye-bye after this season. Mm-hmm. And the running back's going to be drafted out. Like, if it doesn't happen this year, look, that would make me very nervous. What do they got to do for him to stick around?
Yeah, this is as good as they've looked going into a season for a while here. At least 5 years, I would say. But yeah, I think so. The standard set last year was 8-4 in the regular season. That comes obviously on the backs of the 6-game winning streak. I think you got to be above that this year, which is a high standard for Baylor historically. Like, you got to win 9 or 10 games. But you just said it right there. Like, you've got the NFL guys; they're coming back. You retained a huge part of your roster and the most important parts of your roster. Like, and obviously a conference that's wide open every year. You've got to be challenging for that conference title. Like, if you're 7-5 and you're out of the race with a couple of weeks left, that does not spell good news for Dave Aranda. We're trying to avoid the Neil Brown situation, right? At West Virginia, he bounced back the next year with a 9-win season after being horrible. It looked like he was going to get fired. Dave Aranda pretty much does the same thing last year. I would say anything under less than 8 games, barring, a Sawyer Robertson injury in week 1, like, that's a disappointment to win less than 8 games with this roster you have now. So I think anything under 8, Dave's probably sweating again.
That's fair. I think that's fair. I think Baylor should finish in the top 4 in the league. And I know, again, just full disclosure, and it's the hardest league to pick. I get it. Mm-hmm. But full disclosure, the number of quarterbacks with experience is insane. And that's usually the biggest predictor for the final finish.
Right.
I don't remember a league having this high a percentage of starting quarterbacks. Some of them weren't at their school, but come out like Avery Johnson at Kansas State. Physically, he's probably the most talented guy in the league, but he's been a roller coaster. You don't know what you're going to get. So
yeah, Fafita was a guy everyone was high on last year at Arizona, and now you look and it's like, oh yeah, he's coming back. I guess Jalen Daniels at Kansas, same thing. Oh yeah, I guess he is coming back. And it's the depth in this conference is incredible, especially at that position.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it's possible. Is there any one game, by the way, just as a throw in, you're like this road game or this sandwich situation? Like, if you play that, how you play a rivalry game, then the next week it's the sleepy Saturday noon start against somebody. Baylor history says they lose that game. That's just honest.
Yes, no, for sure.
So where is there any point in the schedule like this is where you could screw this whole thing up?
Yeah, the ones I look at, I have a trap game and a reverse trap game. So they play 3 big-time opponents in the first month. They open with Auburn. They play at SMU, and then the second or 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after that, they play Samford, and then they play Arizona State at home. And after Arizona State, they go on the road to Oklahoma State, which is not a place they've traditionally played well. The expectations are not going to be high at OSU. They might fool around and be 3-1 at that point, coming off a bad year last year. That could be one of those sleepy 11 a.m. road games. Could be a tough environment for Baylor. That's one where that's kind of the trap. And then later on after that, they play Kansas State, and then they go to TCU, which is a place they never play well at. They don't play TCU very well most years at all. And they'll be coming off this gauntlet of the schedule, which ends with that Kansas State game at home. And that might be a bit of a letdown. Josh Hoover's got a good arm out there. He's one of those quarterbacks that isn't talked about as much in this conference. That's one I'm worried about as well.
Yeah, the schedule is kind of funky. The Auburn game, I know from talking to Blackerby from Locked On Auburn, we don't think that Baylor will be able to cover Auburn. Like, Auburn's receivers are gross. They've got talent out there. Like, I know Cam Coleman personally. By the way, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. We're going to need it. I think I said that on the crossover with him. We will need it. Yeah.
Cam is a 10-year NFL player, so good luck. But defensively, they're pretty good, but they always seem to shoot themselves in the foot. If Baylor wins that game, in my opinion, it is a catapult into confidence, and it's a catapult into, okay, we can be that team that is kind of like last year's SMU in the ACC or last year's Arizona State in the Big 12. Why not us? And again, NFL running back, NFL receiver, NFL quarterback. You've got a pretty balanced defense talent-wise. I would like to see one more guy in the secondary take that leap forward that could be a number one corner. If you don't, you're probably not going to. Like, if that doesn't happen, that's my biggest question.
Yeah.
But why not Baylor? Otherwise, if they win the shootout games, and again, you got Robertson at quarterback, they could be 9-2 going into the final weekend for a chance to play in the Big 12 title, and then you control your own destiny.
Yep.
That's what you have to ask for. So, but the Auburn game, I think, mentally is important. Beating an SEC school, game one, all that stuff. I think it would be really important. Cam, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Yeah, so Locked On Baylor, wherever you find your podcasts, and on YouTube every weekday. We're dropping them in the morning. You can find me at Real Cam Stewart on X, at Locked On Baylor on X. We try to be funny on there sometimes. So that's where you can see all the stuff, and I appreciate you having me on. I love talking about the future of this team.
Absolutely. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get your pods. Download it on Apple, download it on Spotify, Sports Spider, anywhere else you get your podcast, Podbean, and of course, on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We will see you again. This has been a crossover of Locked On Baylor and Locked On the Portal.